November 4th, 1944. Hill 326, Peleliu Island, Palau Archipelago. The sun had barely cleared the coral ridges when Private First Class Elijah Brennan pulled a standard-issue navy blue wool sock over the muzzle of his M1903 Springfield rifle. Through the 4-power unilateral scope, he could see Japanese positions approximately 600 yards distant, soldiers moving between cave entrances, officers directing morning activities. Completely unaware they were being observed. What the enemy couldn't know was that this simple piece of clothing, combined with a technique Brennan had developed over 26 months of Pacific combat, would transform one Marine into the deadliest single-day threat the Japanese had encountered in the entire Peleliu campaign. In the next 12 hours, 29 men would die. None would see their killer. None would hear the shot that ended their life. None would have the opportunity to fight back.
The sock covering his barrel would rewrite the tactical manual for sniper concealment, proving that sometimes the most devastating weapons in warfare weren't technological marvels, but adaptations so elementary they seemed absurd until they worked. One Marine, one rifle, one sock, and the understanding that in jungle warfare, remaining unseen mattered more than firepower. By sunset, the Japanese defensive position on Hill 326 would be abandoned, their command structure decapitated, their will to fight broken, all because of a Kentucky coal miner's son who understood that the best hunters are the ones their prey never detect. This is the story of how Elijah Brennan became a ghost. Harlan County, Kentucky, 1935. The mountains rose dark and steep around the Brennan homestead. Coal country, hard country, where men went into the earth each morning not knowing if they'd see daylight again. Where families counted every bullet because powder cost money they didn't have. Silas Brennan worked the mines 6 days a week. Sundays, he hunted. Not for sport, for survival. His son Elijah, 10 years old that summer, watched his father check the rifle before they left. A worn Winchester Model 70. The barrel blued from years of use, the stock scarred from a decade of Appalachian forests. "One shot, one animal," Silas said. "We can't afford to miss." Young Eli nodded. He'd heard the words before. But his father's tone made it clear this wasn't advice, it was law. They walked 3 miles into the mountain forest. Silas moved like smoke through the trees, 42 years old, shoulders bent from mine work, lungs damaged from coal dust. But in the woods, he transformed, became something fluid and silent. Eli tried to match his father's movements, stepping where Silas stepped, avoiding dry branches, controlling his breathing. "Watch the wind," Silas whispered. "Deer can smell you from 200 yards if you're upwind." They found the game trail an hour after sunrise, fresh tracks, a buck, maybe 2 does. Silas positioned them downwind behind a fallen oak. Then they waited. Eli learned patience that day, learned that hunting wasn't about walking through the forest looking for animals. It was about understanding where animals would be, positioning yourself correctly, then having the discipline to remain absolutely still until the moment arrived. The buck appeared 90 minutes later, a 6-point, maybe 160 pounds of meat, enough to feed the Brennan family for 2 months. 200 yards distant, moving slowly along the trail, stopping occasionally to test the wind. Silas shouldered the rifle. Eli watched his father's breathing slow, watched him settle into the shot. No rushed movement, no anxiety, just calm preparation. The shot rang out. The buck dropped where it stood. "That's how it's done," Silas said. "You don't spray bullets hoping to hit something. You take your time. Make the shot count. Anything else is just wasting powder and scaring game." They field-dressed the deer together. Silas showed Eli how to work efficiently, how to preserve the meat, how to waste nothing. Walking home with venison strapped to their backs, Silas spoke again. "Mining puts food on the table most days. But hunting is what keeps us alive when the mine shuts down, or when the company doesn't pay. Your grandfather taught me. I'm teaching you. Someday you'll teach your sons." Eli was 10 years old. He didn't understand yet that his father was preparing him for a world where self-reliance meant the difference between survival and starvation, where the ability to put meat on the table with a single bullet wasn't a skill. It was a necessity. But he would understand. Soon enough. By the time Elijah Brennan turned 12, he could shoot. Not just competently, exceptionally. Silas had built a range behind their house. Tin cans at 50 yards. Then 100. Then 200. Every Sunday after church, father and son would spend 2 hours shooting. "Squeeze, don't pull," Silas would say. The shot should surprise you. If you're anticipating the recoil, you're already pulling off target. Eli learned to control his breathing, learned to find the natural pause between heartbeats, learned that shooting wasn't about strength or speed, it was about patience and precision. At 12, he killed his first deer, a doe at 280 yards, iron sights. The animal dropped instantly. Silas clapped him on the shoulder, the only praise his father ever gave. That night, the Brennan family ate well. 7 children around a rough-hewn table, mother serving venison stew, father silent but satisfied. Eli's older brothers worked the mines now, coming home each evening covered in coal dust, coughing, tired beyond their years. His sisters helped their mother with washing, cooking, tending the small vegetable garden that supplemented their diet. Everyone contributed. That was the rule. You earned your place at the table. Eli's contribution was meat, squirrels, rabbits, deer when he could find them. Every animal shot clean, every round accounted for, nothing wasted. The depression deepened. 1931 became 1932. The mine cut hours, then cut pay. Families left the mountains looking for work that didn't exist. The Brennans stayed. They had the garden, they had the forest, they had Eli's rifle. By 15, the boy could hit targets at 400 yards. By 18, he was the best shot in Harlan County. Local men stopped betting against him in shooting competitions. There was no point. Eli Brennan didn't miss. Not couldn't miss, didn't miss. There was a difference. He understood what every bullet cost. Understood that missing meant his family might eat less that week. That kind of pressure forges either anxiety or absolute focus. For Eli, it forged focus. When he looked through iron sights at a target 400 yards distant, he didn't see distance or difficulty. He saw straightforward geometry, wind direction, elevation angle, the natural arc of the bullet's trajectory, variables to be calculated and compensated for. Then, the pause between heartbeats, the slow squeeze, the inevitable result. Other boys his age went to town on Saturday nights, drank corn liquor, chased girls, got into fights. Eli went to the range, hour after hour, building a relationship with the rifle that bordered on instinctive. His mother worried he was too isolated, too serious, too old for 18. Silas understood. "The boy knows what matters," he told his wife. "He'll be ready when the time comes." Neither of them knew what time was coming, what Eli was being prepared for. But in the mountains of eastern Kentucky in 1937, you prepared your children for hardship, because hardship was the only certainty. December 7th, 1941. The radio broadcast reached Harlan County late in the afternoon. Japanese aircraft had attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Casualties in the thousands. The Pacific Fleet devastated. America was at war. Eli listened to the broadcast with his family. 22 years old now, still living at home, still hunting, still shooting. The depression had lifted slightly, but opportunities in Harlan County remained scarce. His father said nothing, sat in his chair smoking his pipe, face unreadable. His mother cried quietly. His brothers, the ones not already in the mines, exchanged glances. They knew what was coming. Eli went outside, stood on the porch looking at the mountains. December cold settling over the ridges, stars appearing in the darkening sky. He'd never been more than 50 miles from Harlan County, never seen the ocean, never fired a shot in anger. But he understood with absolute clarity what he had to do. The next morning, December 8th, Eli walked 12 miles to the Marine Corps recruiting station in Harlan. The line stretched around the block, young men from across the county, farmers, miners, boys who'd never left Kentucky, all waiting to enlist. The recruiter, a gunnery sergeant with campaign ribbons from the First World War, processed them efficiently. Name, age, education, work history. Any military experience? No, sir. Can you shoot? Eli hesitated. How do you explain to a Marine recruiter that you've been shooting since you were 10? That you can hit targets at ranges most men couldn't even see? That missing a shot wasn't something that happened to you? Yes, sir. I can shoot. The recruiter made a note. We'll see about that. Sign here. Eli signed. The recruiter stamped the papers. Report to Paris Island, South Carolina, January 15th. Bring nothing but the clothes on your back. The Corps will provide everything else. The walk home took 4 hours. Eli used the time to think about what he was leaving, about what he was walking toward, about whether he'd ever see these mountains again. His father was waiting on the porch when he arrived. Silas asked no questions. Marines? Yes, sir. Silas nodded, drew on his pipe, let the silence stretch. Finally, you hunted to feed us. Now you'll hunt to save your brothers. He stood, gripped Eli's shoulder. You know how to shoot. Make sure you know who to shoot at, and when. That was all Silas Brennan said about his son going to war. No speeches, no tears, just the distilled wisdom of a man who understood that some paths, once taken, lead places words can't follow. Eli spent Christmas with his family. His mother cooked everything she could afford. His siblings gave him small gifts, a wool scarf, a pocket knife, a letter promising to write. On January 14th, 1942, Eli walked to the bus station, same route he'd walked to enlist. His father accompanied him. They didn't talk, didn't need to. At the station, Silas handed his son something wrapped in oilcloth. Eli unwrapped it. His father's shooting glove, the leather worn smooth from decades of use. Come back, Silas said, the only time Eli ever heard emotion in his father's voice. The bus pulled away. Eli watched the mountains recede, watched Harlan County disappear, watched everything he'd known for 22 years fade into memory. He was headed to Paris Island, to boot camp, to a war he couldn't yet imagine, armed with nothing but the clothes on his back and the lessons of a Kentucky coal miner who taught his son that missing wasn't an option. Paris Island, South Carolina, January 1942. The Marine Corps recruit depot consumed young men and remade them. Drill instructors screaming, forced marches, physical training that broke bodies and rebuilt them harder. The transformation from civilian to Marine was brutal by design. Eli endured it quietly. He wasn't the strongest recruit, wasn't the fastest, but he had something the Corps valued above raw athleticism. He could follow instructions, and he didn't quit. The real separation came during rifle qualification. Every Marine, regardless of specialty, had to qualify with the M1903 Springfield rifle. The course of fire included positions at 200, 300, and 500 yards. Recruits were expected to achieve a minimum score to pass. Eli's turn came on a cold February morning, wind gusting across the range, flags snapping, conditions that would challenge even experienced shooters. The rangemaster, Gunnery Sergeant Thaddeus Holbrook, had been running Marine rifle qualification for 18 years. He'd seen thousands of recruits, farm boys who'd hunted their whole lives, city kids who'd never touched a firearm, everything in between. He'd never seen anyone shoot like Elijah Brennan. At 200 yards, Eli put all 10 rounds in the inner ring. Perfect score. At 300 yards, same result. 10 rounds, 10 hits, inner ring. At 500 yards, where wind and distance turned marksmanship into educated guessing for most shooters, Eli fired 50 rounds. 48 hit the inner ring. Holbrook walked down to the target, examined it, walked back to the firing line, looked at the skinny recruit from Kentucky who was field stripping his rifle with calm efficiency. Brennan. Yes, Gunnery Sergeant. Where'd you learn to shoot like that? Home, Gunnery Sergeant. Harlan County, Kentucky. Holbrook made a note in his book. You ever shoot competitively? No, Gunnery Sergeant, just hunting. What'd you hunt? Whatever needed hunting, Gunnery Sergeant. Squirrels, mostly. Deer, when we could find them. Holbrook nodded. He understood. Depression-era Appalachia, where missing meant your family didn't eat, where every cartridge was precious, where you learned to shoot or you learned to go hungry. How far could you shoot, back home? 400 yards, Gunnery Sergeant. Maybe 450 on a good day. Iron sights? Yes, Gunnery Sergeant. Holbrook closed his book. Son, in 20 years running this range, I've never seen shooting like what you just did, not even close. He paused. How do you feel about Scout Sniper School? Eli had no idea what that meant. If the Corps thinks that's where I should go, Gunnery Sergeant. The Corps thinks exactly that. Report to my office after evening chow. We'll get your paperwork started. That night, Holbrook filed a report with Marine Corps Training Command. The subject line read, Recruit Brennan, Elijah. Exceptional marksmanship capability. Recommend Scout Sniper School immediately. 3 weeks later, Eli received orders. Upon completion of boot camp, he would report to Camp Matthews near San Diego, California, for advanced sniper training. His fellow recruits congratulated him. Being selected for specialized training was an honor, meant the Corps saw potential. Eli simply nodded. He'd shot the way his father taught him, calm, patient, making every round count. If the Marine Corps wanted to teach him more about shooting, he'd learn. That's what you did. You followed orders. You did your job. Boot camp ended in March. Eli graduated in the middle of his class. Not the best at close combat, not the fastest runner, not the loudest or most aggressive. But when the final scores were tallied, his rifle qualification numbers remained the highest Parris Island had ever recorded. Holbrook made sure of that, made sure every instructor knew, made sure the legend started early. The quiet kid from Kentucky who didn't miss. Camp Matthews, California, March 1942. The Scout Sniper School occupied a remote section of the base, separate from regular infantry training. The Marines who trained here were different, more patient, more calculating, less interested in direct combat, and more focused on precision elimination of high-value targets. The instructors were veterans, men who'd fought in France during the Great War, who understood that one well-placed shot could accomplish what an entire platoon might fail to achieve. The curriculum was demanding: marksmanship fundamentals, range estimation, wind reading, camouflage techniques, observation skills, fieldcraft, how to move unseen, how to build a hide, how to remain motionless for hours, how to kill from a distance and disappear before the enemy even knew they were under attack. Eli excelled at all of it, not because he was naturally gifted at stealth or camouflage, but because he approached every lesson with the same patient focus his father had instilled. Learn, practice, refine, repeat. The shooting came easy. The M1903 Springfield with inertial scope was a precision instrument compared to the worn Winchester he'd used in Kentucky. The optic allowed him to see targets he could barely make out with iron sights. The rifle's accuracy was exceptional. In Eli's hands, it became surgical. But marksmanship was only part of sniper training. The harder lessons involved signature management, how to shoot without revealing your position. Every rifle shot created signatures the enemy could use to locate the shooter. Muzzle flash, the bright flare when burning powder gases mixed with oxygen, visible for hundreds of yards, especially in low light. Dust signature, the muzzle blast disturbing dirt, sand, vegetation around the barrel, creating a visible cloud that pointed directly to the shooter's position. Heat shimmer, repeated firing, heating the barrel until it created visible distortion in the air. Sound, the crack of the shot echoing across the battlefield, giving the enemy directional information. Smoke, powder combustion, leaving a telltale haze. German snipers on the Eastern Front had developed flash suppressors, mechanical devices that partially contained muzzle blast. Soviet snipers used careful positioning to minimize dust signatures. But these solutions were incomplete. Flash suppressors added weight and length to the rifle, made it harder to maneuver in tight spaces. Positioning constraints meant passing up good shots because the location would reveal you. Eli became obsessed with the problem. There had to be a better way. Some method of reducing all signatures simultaneously without modifying the rifle or limiting tactical flexibility. The instructors taught standard techniques. Position yourself where natural vegetation will break up your outline. Fire from shadow when possible. Limit your rate of fire to prevent barrel heat buildup. Good advice, but not good enough.
Not for Eli. He spent his free time thinking about the problem, about physics, about how muzzle blast propagated, about what materials might contain or diffuse it. The breakthrough came during a field exercise in June. The scenario was straightforward. Students would establish sniper positions in a sector of broken terrain. Instructors would attempt to locate them by observing signature patterns. Students who remained undetected for the full exercise period would pass. Those located would repeat the exercise until they demonstrated adequate concealment skills. Eli positioned himself in sandy terrain, good sight lines, multiple escape routes, natural defilade that would hide his silhouette. He fired 3 shots at distant targets, all hits. But on the third shot, the instructor running the exercise, Captain Robert McLaughlin, immediately called out Eli's position. "Brennan, you're compromised. Enemy counter-sniper would have you zeroed in 3 shots." Eli knew McLaughlin was right. The sandy soil created obvious dust clouds with each muzzle blast. Even though Eli was well camouflaged, the dust signature gave him away instantly. Frustrated, Eli grabbed his spare sock from his pack. Standard issue wool, dark blue. He'd packed an extra pair because the California desert was hard on clothing. Blisters were common. Without thinking it through, acting on pure instinct, he pulled the sock over the muzzle of his rifle. Maybe the fabric would contain the blast, reduce the dust cloud. He fired again. The difference was immediately obvious. The sock absorbed most of the muzzle blast gases before they could disturb the surrounding sand. The flash was diffused through thousands of individual wool fibers, rather than escaping as a coherent flare. Most importantly, the sock broke up the rifle's distinctive outline, creating visual confusion. Captain McLaughlin was watching through binoculars. He knew approximately where Brennan was positioned, had just called out his location 30 seconds earlier. But after the 4th shot, fired through the sock, McLaughlin couldn't pinpoint the exact position. Eli fired 5 more rounds. McLaughlin observed carefully, finally called out, "Brennan, show yourself." Eli stood, removing the sock from his rifle barrel. McLaughlin approached. "What the hell did you just do differently?" Eli held up the sock. "Covered the muzzle, sir. Thought it might reduce the dust signature." McLaughlin examined the sock, navy blue wool, standard Marine Corps issue, now bearing a small hole where bullets had passed through, powder residue staining the fabric. "Let me see that rifle." Eli handed over the Springfield. McLaughlin inspected the barrel. No damage, no fouling beyond normal. The sock had acted as a muzzle blast diffuser, crude, improvised, completely unofficial, and remarkably effective. "Fire another round," McLaughlin ordered. "With the sock." Eli complied. McLaughlin watched the muzzle through his binoculars. The flash was barely visible, the dust disturbance minimal. Even knowing exactly where to look, McLaughlin had difficulty tracking the shot's origin. That evening, McLaughlin filed an after-action report with Marine Corps Training Command. Private First Class Brennan has developed an unconventional but effective technique for signature reduction using standard-issue wool socks. During field exercises, this method demonstrated approximately 80 to 90% reduction in visible muzzle signature compared to unmodified rifle fire. Recommend evaluation for potential field implementation. Technique requires no special equipment, no rifle modification, and can be adopted immediately by any Marine sniper. The report reached Training Command in late June. A panel of instructors reviewed it, tested the technique themselves, confirmed McLaughlin's observations, then rejected it. The official response, dated July 3, 1942, was brief and dismissive. Method deemed unconventional and unserious. Marine Corps snipers employed proper equipment and established techniques, not improvised field expedients. Request for doctrinal inclusion denied. McLaughlin showed Eli the rejection letter. "I'm sorry, son. I thought they'd see the value. But the brass doesn't like anything that looks like we're making it up as we go along." Eli nodded. He wasn't surprised. The military ran on regulations and established procedures. Some Kentucky kid suggesting you could improve sniper tactics with a spare sock probably seemed ridiculous to men who'd been doing this since the Great War. "Permission to continue using the technique myself, sir." McLaughlin thought about it. The official doctrine said no, but unofficial battlefield adaptations had always been part of warfare. If a Marine found something that worked and kept him alive, who was McLaughlin to forbid it? "Officially, I'm telling you to follow established procedures." Unofficially? McLaughlin handed back the sock. "Every sniper I ever knew had tricks the manual didn't cover. Just don't make me write another report about it." Eli packed 6 extra dark-colored socks when he received deployment orders in September. The Marine Corps might not approve of his technique, but the Marine Corps wasn't going to be the one lying in the dirt trying to kill Japanese soldiers without getting killed in return. Eli would use what worked. That's what his father taught him. You did whatever was necessary to bring meat home, to keep your family alive, to complete the mission. The sock worked, so Eli would use it. Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands, September 1942. The 1st Marine Division landed on Guadalcanal in August, the first American offensive operation of the Pacific War. The strategic objective was Henderson Field, an airstrip the Japanese were constructing. If completed, it would give enemy aircraft control of the southern Solomon Islands. The Marines took the airfield. Then the Japanese counterattacked, and counterattacked again and again. By September, Guadalcanal had devolved into a brutal campaign of attrition. Japanese forces controlled most of the island. Marines held a defensive perimeter around Henderson Field. Both sides were starving. Both sides were dying of malaria and dysentery. Both sides were exhausted. This was Eli's introduction to combat. The dense jungle terrain was unlike anything he'd trained for. Visibility rarely exceeded 100 yards. Traditional long-range sniping was impossible. The entire tactical environment had to be reimagined. Eli adapted, used his sock technique at closer ranges, focused on concealment rather than distance, learned to pick firing positions where the jungle would further break up his signature. His spotter was Corporal Bennett Walsh, 28 years old, Boston Irish, tough as bridge cable. Walsh had been a stevedore before the war, loading cargo ships in Boston Harbor. He understood hard work and harder men. The two Marines made an effective team. Walsh's job was observation and range estimation. Eli's job was pulling the trigger. They communicated in whispers and hand signals, moved through the jungle like ghosts, set up, waited, fired, disappeared. The first kill came on September 23rd. A Japanese officer was directing machine gun fire against Marine positions. About 200 yards distant, partially concealed behind jungle vegetation, but visible enough through Eli's scope. Eli had pulled a dark sock over his rifle barrel, dampened it slightly with water from his canteen. The moisture would help prevent the fabric from igniting due to powder gases. He settled into the shot, controlled his breathing, found the pause between heartbeats. The trigger squeezed smooth. The officer dropped. The Japanese machine gun crew looked around frantically, trying to locate where the shot had come from, seeing nothing, hearing nothing beyond the general chaos of the jungle battlefield. After 30 seconds of confusion, they abandoned their position, retreated deeper into the jungle, unwilling to stay in a location where their officer had just been killed by an invisible enemy. Walsh turned to Eli, eyes wide. "They don't know where we are. They have no idea." It was the first time either Marine fully understood what Eli's technique meant. Not just reduced signature, not just better concealment, complete invisibility on the battlefield, the ability to kill and vanish like smoke. Over the next 4 months, Eli refined his method through constant field testing. He discovered that dark-colored socks worked significantly better than light ones. Navy blue or black absorbed muzzle flash more effectively than tan or olive drab. The darker fabric created less contrast against the rifle barrel. Wool,
proved superior to cotton. Wool's density contained the blast gases better, while maintaining enough breathability to prevent dangerous pressure buildup inside the sock. Dampening the sock improved performance, but required changing it more frequently. Wet fabric prevented powder residue from igniting, but also degraded faster under the heat and friction of repeated firing. Most critically, Eli learned the sock's limitation. After approximately 5 to 7 shots, depending on conditions, accumulated powder residue would ignite. The sock would begin producing the very flash signature it was designed to eliminate. The solution was elementary. Change socks frequently. Treat them as consumable equipment. Eli carried a dozen extra socks on every patrol. Change them after every 4 or 5 shots. Never push the fabric beyond its effective lifespan. By the time the 1st Marine Division withdrew from Guadalcanal in February 1943, Eli had 17 confirmed kills. More importantly, he had a complete, tested methodology. Use dark wool socks, preferably navy blue or black. Dampen the sock slightly before positioning. Fire no more than 5 shots before replacing the sock. Carry a minimum of 12 socks for a full-day operation. Position in locations where natural vegetation would further break up any residual signatures. It worked, consistently, effectively. Captain James Ridgway commanded the platoon Eli and Walsh were assigned to. Ridgway was 35, Virginia-born, career Marine. He'd fought in Haiti and Nicaragua during the Banana Wars of the 20s and early 30s, seen combat before most of his men were old enough to shave. Initially, Ridgway was skeptical of Eli's technique. "Some hillbilly kid with a sock on his rifle," was how he described it to other officers. Then came the ambush at Tenarue River. Japanese forces had infiltrated close to Marine lines, set up positions for a dawn attack. Ridgway's platoon stumbled into the advance elements, firefight erupted, Marines pinned down by accurate machine gun fire, 2 men already wounded, the situation deteriorating rapidly. Ridgway was trying to coordinate a flanking movement when he saw 3 Japanese officers conferring behind a fallen log, maybe 250 yards distant, directing their forces, coordinating the attack. Before Ridgway could call for artillery support, all 3 officers dropped, dead before they hit the ground. 10 seconds, 3 shots, 3 kills. The Japanese attack faltered immediately. Without leadership, their assault lost coordination. Marines counterattacked, drove the enemy back. After the engagement, Ridgway found Eli and Walsh. They were calmly field-stripping their rifles, preparing to move to the next position. "That was you? All 3 officers?" "Yes, sir." "I didn't hear where the shots came from, saw no muzzle flash, nothing." Eli held up his rifle, the sock still covering the barrel. "Technique I've been working on, sir." Ridgway examined the setup, asked questions, listened to Eli's explanation of how and why it worked. Finally, "You teach this to every sniper in this platoon, understood?" "Yes, sir." "And Brennan? You need socks. You tell the supply sergeant I personally authorized it. He gives you any grief, send him to me." Word spread through Marine sniper units on Guadalcanal. The quiet kid from Kentucky who could kill without being detected, who used a spare sock to eliminate muzzle signature, whose technique actually worked in combat conditions. Some snipers tried it, found it effective, adopted the method. Others remained skeptical, preferred traditional approaches. That was fine. Eli wasn't trying to convert anyone. He used what worked for him. In March 1943, the Marine Corps Scout Sniper Instruction Manual was updated. An appendix was added. Expedient Signature Reduction, Field Method, PFC E. Brennan. The description was brief, clinical, listed the technique without endorsing it, acknowledged it as one possible approach among many. But it was there, in official Marine Corps doctrine, a field improvisation by an enlisted Marine, unprecedented. Training instructors remained divided. Some taught it as an interesting historical footnote. Others ignored it entirely. The technique was too unconventional, too crude, too much like something desperate men would try when proper equipment wasn't available. Which, Eli reflected, was exactly right. He'd developed it because he needed a solution and didn't have access to anything better. That was the definition of field improvisation. Use what you have, make it work, or die trying. The division rotated off Guadalcanal in February. Eli had lost 20 pounds, had malaria, had dysentery, had nightmares about men dying in jungle darkness. But he was alive. His 17 confirmed kills meant 17 Japanese soldiers who wouldn't kill Marines. 17 enemy combatants removed from the battlefield through patience and precision. He'd done his job. That's all that mattered. Cape Gloucester, New Britain, December 1943. The next deployment came fast. The 1st Marine Division barely had time to recover before receiving new orders. Cape Gloucester, another jungle hellhole, another island the Japanese had fortified and the Marines needed to take. The operation began the day after Christmas. A salt landing in pouring rain, dense rainforest, swamps, mud that swallowed equipment, conditions that made Guadalcanal look pleasant by comparison. But for Eli's purposes, the rain provided an unexpected advantage. Wet socks performed even better than dampened ones. The constant moisture prevented the fabric from drying out and potentially igniting from powder residue. The rain also reduced visibility for Japanese observers, made it even harder to spot the minimal signatures Eli's technique created. Operations lasted 47 days. Eli and Walsh operated continuously, setting up in the jungle, waiting, engaging targets of opportunity, displacing before Japanese forces could respond. 40 confirmed kills over those 7 weeks, Japanese officers, machine gun crews, observers with binoculars, forward artillery spotters, anyone whose death would degrade enemy combat effectiveness. Eli was methodical about it, never rushed, never took a shot unless he was certain of the target and certain he could make the shot. Walsh kept detailed records, range, wind conditions, target type, result. The notebook became a tactical manual written in blood and precision. By the end of Cape Gloucester, other Marine snipers were actively seeking out Eli and Walsh, asking questions, requesting demonstrations. The sock technique was gaining acceptance, not through official channels, but through battlefield results. A captured Japanese intelligence report, translated after the operation, provided insight into enemy perspective. American forces employ snipers of exceptional concealment capability. Standard counter-sniper procedures prove ineffective. 65th Brigade has lost multiple officers to unseen shooters. Effect on morale is significant. Recommend development of new detection methods. The Japanese had no answer for a threat they couldn't locate. Their doctrine emphasized aggressive assault and close combat. They had excellent soldiers and strong fighting spirit, but they couldn't fight what they couldn't see. Eli was becoming something the enemy feared, not because of any individual kill, but because of the cumulative psychological impact. The knowledge that officers could die at any moment from an invisible source, that conferring in supposedly safe rear areas might still expose you to sudden death. Fear was its own weapon, sometimes more effective than bullets. By September 1944, Elijah Brennan had participated in 4 major campaigns. His confirmed kill count stood at 57. But the true measure of his impact went beyond numbers. Multiple Marine sniper platoons now issued extra socks as standard equipment. The 3rd Marine Division Sniper Platoon had officially adopted the technique after seeing results at Bougainville. Training materials were being updated to include more detailed instructions based on Eli's field experience. Most significantly, Japanese forces across the Pacific had developed a fear of areas where American snipers might operate. Captured documents and interrogated prisoners repeatedly mentioned ghost shooters and invisible killers. The psychological warfare value was immense. And it all stemmed from a Kentucky coal miner's son who'd learned that missing wasn't an option. Eli didn't think of himself as special. His technique was just common sense applied to a specific problem. The rifle flash gave away your position. The sock eliminated the flash. Elementary. But warfare had always rewarded straightforward solutions. Complicated plans fell apart under combat stress. Basic techniques could be taught quickly, executed reliably, and remembered under pressure. The sock worked because it was basic. Now came Peleliu. September 15th, 1944. Intelligence predicted the island would fall in 4 days. An easy operation. Secure the airfield, neutralize Japanese resistance, move on to the next objective. The intelligence was catastrophically wrong. Colonel Kunio Nakagawa commanded the Japanese garrison on Peleliu. He'd studied every American amphibious assault of the war, learned from Japanese failures at Tarawa and Saipan, developed new defensive doctrines specifically designed to counter American tactics. Instead of defending the beaches, Nakagawa allowed the Marines to land unopposed, then engaged them from fortified positions inland. The Umabrogel Mountain, which Marines would come to call Bloody Nose Ridge, became a fortress of interconnected caves and tunnels. Some positions buried under 30 feet of coral and concrete, impervious to naval gunfire, resistant to aerial bombardment. The Marines were slaughtered. By early November, the 1st Marine Division had suffered over 60% casualties, the worst losses of any campaign in Marine Corps history. The fighting had devolved into a nightmare of close-quarters cave assaults, flamethrowers, grenades, hand-to-hand combat in darkness. Progress was measured in yards, sometimes in feet. Men died for terrain that had no strategic value except that Japanese soldiers occupied it. Hill 326 was one such position. A coral outcropping that gave Japanese forces observation over Marine supply routes. Standard infantry assaults had failed. Artillery bombardment was ineffective against caves buried deep in coral rock. The division commander needed a different approach. Captain Ridgway, now commanding the Scout Sniper Platoon, proposed using snipers to systematically eliminate Japanese observers and officers. The strategy required snipers to remain in position for extended periods, engaging targets of opportunity while staying undetected. Extremely dangerous, but potentially more effective than continued frontal assaults. Ridgway briefed his snipers on the mission. Most recognized it as borderline suicidal. Staying in one position for days, within rifle range of Japanese caves, hoping they wouldn't send out patrols to find you. Eli volunteered immediately. "Give me Walsh and 48 hours. I'll shut down that hill." Ridgway looked at the young Marine. 25 years old now, lean from years of Pacific combat, malaria thin, eyes that had seen too much death, but steady, calm, absolutely confident in his abilities. "You understand what you're volunteering for. If they detect you, there's no backup, no quick reaction force. You'll be alone out there." "Yes, sir, I understand." "Why you, Brennan? Why not let someone else take this one?" Eli considered the question. The honest answer was complicated. He was good at this, better than good. He'd spent 25 years learning to hunt, learning to shoot, learning to remain unseen. This mission was exactly what all that training prepared him for. But there was more. 57 men were dead because of him. 57 Japanese soldiers who'd had families and futures until Eli put bullets through them. He regretted none of those kills. They'd been necessary. But they weighed on him. And the only way to balance that weight was to make sure those deaths accomplished something. If his skills could break this Japanese position without more Marines dying in frontal assaults, then that's what needed to happen. "Because I can do it, sir, and because it needs to be done." Ridgway approved the mission. The night of November 3rd, 1944, Elijah Brennan and Bennett Walsh moved into position under cover of darkness. They carried everything they'd need for an extended operation: rifle, ammunition, 12 navy blue wool socks, water, rations, and the accumulated experience of 26 months hunting men in the Pacific. They found the position after 2 hours of careful movement. A coral outcropping, approximately 500 yards from the main Japanese positions, irregular surface creating natural shadows, native vegetation providing additional concealment. They built their hide with infinite patience. Every branch placed deliberately, every fold of their poncho arranged to break up human outline. When they finished, the hide was invisible from 20 yards. Then they waited for dawn. November 4th would prove whether everything Eli had learned, everything he'd developed, everything he'd become was enough to accomplish the impossible. 29 men would die that day. None would see death coming. None would understand what killed them. None would have the chance to warn their comrades. Hill 326 would fall without another Marine dying in assault. And Elijah Brennan would become a ghost story the Japanese told in whispers, the invisible killer of Peleliu, the Marine who made men disappear with nothing but patience, precision, and a wool sock over his rifle barrel. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, lying in the coral hide as darkness settled over the island, Eli thought about his father, about lessons learned in Kentucky mountains, about making every shot count. Tomorrow, he'd make them count.
All 29 of them.
November 4th, 1944, 0430 hours. The hide was complete. Elijah Brennan lay in the coral crevice, his body molded to the stone. Bennett Walsh positioned slightly behind and to the left, both Marines invisible beneath the poncho and carefully arranged vegetation. The night sounds of Peleliu surrounded them. Insects, distant artillery, the occasional burst of machine gun fire from other sectors. The island never truly slept. Combat continued in darkness. Men died while others tried to rest. But here, in this particular piece of coral rock, 500 yards from Japanese positions, there was only waiting. Eli checked his rifle for the 100th time, M1903 Springfield, unnurtle 8-power scope, the familiar weight and balance of the weapon that had become an extension of himself. 40 rounds in stripper clips, another 160 in his pack, 12 navy blue wool socks, each one potentially worth 5 or 6 shots before powder residue would compromise effectiveness. Walsh had his binoculars, rangefinder, notebook with pencil, the tools of observation. His job was to see everything. Eli's job was to kill what needed killing. They'd worked together for 2 years now. Guadalcanal, Cape Gloucester, now Peleliu. 26 months of hunting men through Pacific jungles. They communicated in whispers and hand signals, knew each other's rhythms, trusted each other completely. That trust would be tested today. 500 hours. Movement in the pre-dawn darkness. Japanese patrol. 4 soldiers and an NCO, moving along the ridgeline, maybe 50 yards from Eli and Walsh's position. Both Marines froze, stopped breathing, became stone. The patrol was searching for exactly what Eli and Walsh were doing. American snipers, forward observers, anyone stupid enough to position themselves within rifle range of Japanese caves. The NCO stopped, scanned the terrain with binoculars, looking directly at the vegetation covering their hide. Eli could see the man's face through his scope. Young, maybe 23, serious expression, professional soldier doing his job. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The NCO continued scanning, moved his binoculars slowly across the coral outcropping, stopped again on their position. Walsh's hand tightened on his own rifle. Not the sniper weapon, his backup M1903. If they were discovered, this would become a firefight. 5 Japanese soldiers at close range, 2 Marines in a fixed position with no escape route. The mathematics were ugly. The NCO lowered his binoculars, said something to his men. The patrol moved on, continued along the ridge, disappeared into the jungle. Walsh released a breath he'd been holding, whispered so quietly Eli barely heard. 15 yards. He was 15 yards away. I know. We should abort. Too close. They're actively patrolling this sector. Eli considered it. The tactically sound decision was probably withdrawal. Live to fight another day. Don't push your luck when the enemy nearly walked on top of you. But Hill 326 needed to fall. Marines were dying trying to take it. If Eli and Walsh withdrew now, more frontal assaults would be ordered. More men would die attacking fortified caves. Not yet. We came to do a job. Walsh understood. Sometimes the mission mattered more than personal survival. That was the bargain every Marine made. You might die. Probably would die eventually if you stayed in combat long enough. But you'd die accomplishing something that mattered. They waited for dawn. 0543 hours. first light breaking over the Pacific. The sun not yet visible, but the sky lightening, shadows losing their depth, the world transitioning from night to day. Eli pulled the first sock from his pack. Navy blue wool, standard Marine Corps issue. He dampened it slightly with water from his canteen, not soaking wet, just moist enough to prevent powder residue from igniting during the first few shots. He rolled the sock over the muzzle of his Springfield, pulled it snug. The fabric covered the last 6 inches of barrel, broke up the rifle's distinctive outline, transformed a precision weapon into something that looked almost like a crude club wrapped in cloth. But Eli knew better, knew what this basic modification would allow him to accomplish. Through his scope, he began systematic observation of the Japanese positions. Cave entrances were visible at various points along the ridge, some natural coral formations, others obviously man-made, concrete reinforcements, camouflage netting. The Japanese had transformed this hill into a fortress. Soldiers were beginning to move, morning routines, water being carried, officers emerging to inspect positions, the daily rituals of men at war. Eli watched, learned the patterns, noted which caves seemed to house command personnel, which positions held observers, where the machine gun emplacements were located. Walsh used the rangefinder, called out distances quietly. Cave entrance, center ridge, 580 yards. Cave cluster, left side, 600 even. That fortified position, far right, 620. Eli made mental notes, filed the information, built a 3-dimensional map in his mind of the entire Japanese defensive network. First target appeared at 0607, Japanese officer, emerging from a cave entrance, rising sun collar insignia visible even at distance through Eli's scope. Second lieutenant equivalent, young, maybe 24 years old. The officer carried papers, maps probably, stopped outside the cave entrance, began examining them, completely unaware he was being observed through an 8-power scope by a Marine who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Walsh confirmed through binoculars. Officer, 580 yards. Wind left to right, maybe 4 miles per hour, steady. Eli checked his own assessment, agreed with Walsh's range estimation. The wind was light but consistent, would push the bullet right. He'd need to hold slightly left to compensate. Elevation was minimal, maybe 3 degrees downward, not enough to significantly affect trajectory at this distance. "You have the shot?" Walsh asked. "Yes. Take it when ready." 0612 hours. Eli settled into the firing position. His body became the rifle. The rifle became an extension of his will. The distance between thought and action compressed to nothing. Breathing slowed, found the natural pause between heartbeats, the moment of absolute stillness that exists between one beat and the next. Crosshair placed slightly high and left of center mass, compensating for wind, for distance, for the slight downward angle. The trigger squeezed smooth, the shot inevitable. Through the scope, Eli watched the Japanese officer collapse, dropped instantly, dead before his body hit the ground. The muzzle blast was almost completely suppressed by the sock. No visible flash, minimal dust disturbance. The visual signature that normally screamed, "Sniper here," was simply absent. Japanese soldiers near the cave entrance looked around, confused. Their officer had just fallen, but they didn't know why. Couldn't identify where a shot might have come from. Saw and heard nothing that indicated incoming fire. After 10 seconds of confusion, 2 soldiers dragged the officer's body back into the cave. The others remained outside, alert but directionless. They knew something had happened, but couldn't identify the threat. Walsh recorded in his notebook, 0612, Target 1, Officer, 580 yards, confirmed kill, no enemy reaction observed. 1 down, 28 to go. The next hour passed in careful observation. Eli took no rushed shots, built a picture, understanding the Japanese routine, learning when officers made their rounds, when observers rotated, when soldiers felt safe enough to move between positions. Information was as valuable as kills. At 0723, another officer emerged. Senior, elaborate sword, Soldiers nearby showing deference. Captain, or major equivalent. 610 yards. Wind had picked up, maybe 6 miles per hour now. Still left to right, but with occasional gusts. Eli waited for the wind to settle. The officer stopped, turned to speak with a subordinate, presenting a perfect broadside target. Eli fired. The officer collapsed. The subordinate looked around frantically, shouted something. Other soldiers emerged from the cave, all scanning the terrain, seeing nothing. They still didn't understand they were under sniper fire, thought perhaps it was artillery. A stray round. Bad luck. They didn't realize this was precision. Deliberate, systematic elimination of their command structure. Kill number 2. Still no Japanese reaction indicating they'd located the sniper position. 0809. Machine gunner repositioning his weapon. 595 yards. The shot broke clean. The gunner dropped. His crew abandoned the position immediately. Scattered. Wouldn't return. One machine gun eliminated without ever firing a shot at Marine positions. Kill 3. 0856. Observer with binoculars. 570 yards. The observer was scanning Marine lines, trying to identify targets for artillery. Eli's shot struck him center mass. The observer fell. His binoculars shattered beside him. Kill 4. The Japanese were losing their eyes, losing their ability to coordinate, losing their leadership one bullet at a time, and they still couldn't locate the source. 0900 hours. Through the scope at 0900 hours, Eli observed his next target. Japanese officer, maybe 25 years old. The man was reading a letter, smiling. Eli could see the photograph the officer held. A woman, young, holding an infant. The officer kissed the photograph, tucked it carefully into his shirt pocket, turned to give orders to nearby soldiers. Eli's crosshair settled on center mass, right where the photograph rested against the officer's heart. The shot would go through the photo, through the image of wife and child, through the man himself. Eli hesitated. First time in 57 kills, he'd hesitated. Walsh sensed it. Eli? Through the scope, Eli watched the officer laughing with his men, saw him as a person, not just a target, a husband, a father, someone whose family was waiting for him to come home, just like Eli's own family was waiting back in Kentucky. Eli, you have the shot or not? The mathematics were clear. This officer would direct fire against Marines, would kill Americans if given the chance. That photograph in his pocket didn't change his duties, didn't change the war, and killing him might save a dozen Marines who also had families waiting. I have it. The trigger broke. The officer collapsed. The photograph stayed in his pocket. The wife and child would never know their husband and father carried their image to the moment of his death. Kill number 5. Eli had seen the man's humanity, had recognized him as more than a target, and killed him anyway. That was the price of this work. You saw who they were, and you killed them, because the alternative was they killed your brothers. Walsh was quiet for a moment, then, you saw the photo. Yes. Does it change anything? No. It just makes it harder. Good. The day it stops being hard is the day we've lost something we shouldn't lose. Eli changed to the second sock, rolled the used one carefully, placed it in his pack. 0900 to 1100 hours. The killing accelerated. Eli had found his rhythm, the perfect balance between patience and aggression, waiting for high-value targets. Officers, NCOs, specialists whose deaths would degrade Japanese combat effectiveness, but also maintaining steady pressure, not giving them time to adapt, to recover, to implement countermeasures. Kill 6, kill 7, kill 8, kill 9, kill 10, kill 11. Walsh's notebook filled with clinical precision, time, target type, range, result, the arithmetic of death. Japanese behavior continued to change. Some soldiers refused to leave cave entrances, others would sprint between positions in sudden bursts. No more casual movement, no more standing in the open. They were afraid, understood something was out there, something invisible, something patient. The psychological impact was exactly what Eli intended. Fear was its own weapon. Scared soldiers made mistakes, refused orders, abandoned positions. At 10:45, an opportunity emerged. Through the scope, Eli observed unusual activity near a central cave entrance. 620 yards, multiple officers gathering, maps being examined, a conference of some kind. Walsh saw it too. Command staff, that's their entire leadership in one place. I see it. Range 620, winds shifted, 3 o'clock now, maybe 5 miles per hour. Eli studied the group, 6 officers total, 1 clearly senior, probably the battalion commander or equivalent, the others likely company commanders, all the leadership for this sector of Hill 326, all standing together, in the open, for what they assumed was a secure rear area conference. They were wrong. 11:34 hours, the senior officer was speaking, gesturing at the maps, the other officers listening, planning something, probably a counterattack, or defensive adjustments. They wouldn't live to implement whatever they were planning. Eli's first shot broke at 11:34 hours exactly. The senior officer dropped. Center mass hit, dead before his body completed its fall. The other officers scattered, but scattered in predictable directions, toward cover they thought was safe, toward positions Eli had already ranged. 11:34 hours and 5 seconds. Second officer killed, running toward a cave entrance, caught mid-stride. 11:34 hours and 8 seconds. Third officer, dropping behind a coral outcropping that provided insufficient protection. 11:34 hours and 12 seconds. Fourth officer, nearly made it to cover. 11:34 hours and 16 seconds. Fifth officer, a senior NCO trying to rally the survivors. 20 seconds. 5 officers, all dead. The Japanese command structure for Hill 326 had just been decapitated. Walsh stared through his binoculars. Jesus Christ, Eli. Eli was already changing socks, reloading. The work wasn't finished. 1200 hours. American signals intelligence intercepted Japanese radio communications from Hill 326. The Marine radio operator, positioned 200 yards behind Eli and Walsh, was monitoring enemy frequencies. Standard procedure. Sometimes you learned useful tactical information. What he heard made him immediately contact Captain Ridgway. The Japanese transmissions were frantic, panicked. Officers requesting orders, subordinates reporting commanders dead, complete confusion. One transmission came through clearly, a Japanese NCO speaking to what sounded like battalion headquarters. "All officers dead. We cannot see the enemy. Request immediate guidance. Men are refusing to leave caves." Response from headquarters: "Maintain defensive positions. Reinforce." The transmission cut off abruptly. The radio operator listened for 10 more minutes, heard nothing but silence from Hill 326. The Japanese had stopped communicating entirely. Ridgway received the report at 1300 hours, read it twice, then walked to the forward observation post where he could see Hill 326 through binoculars. The hillside that had been crawling with Japanese activity that morning was now silent. No movement, no visible soldiers, just abandoned positions and the occasional body visible in the open. "One Marine," Ridgway said to no one in particular. "One Marine with a rifle and a sock just broke an entire defensive network." 1300 hours. The impact was immediate and devastating. Marine infantry units facing Hill 326 reported significant reduction in enemy fire. The Japanese had stopped shooting, stopped moving. Their defensive coordination had collapsed. Without officers to direct them, without NCOs to lead them, the soldiers simply hunkered in their caves, waiting, afraid. By 1300 hours, Eli had 19 confirmed kills. Walsh calculated they'd been in position for 8.5 hours. Eli had fired 23 rounds total, 4 misses or unconfirmed hits, 19 kills. The ammunition expenditure was remarkable. Most snipers averaged 3 or 4 rounds per confirmed kill. Eli was achieving better than 1-to-1. Every bullet he fired either killed someone or came close enough that the miss didn't matter tactically. This was the culmination of everything. 25 years of shooting, his father's lessons, Depression-era Kentucky where missing meant going hungry, 2 years of Pacific combat, the SOC technique refined through constant field testing, all of it converging in this coral hide on Peleliu, all of it focused on the systematic destruction of Japanese defensive capability on Hill 326. The discipline required was extraordinary. Eli hadn't shifted position significantly since dawn, had to remain nearly motionless, only moving to aim and fire.
The coral was brutally uncomfortable. His body ached, muscles cramped from maintaining the same position for hours. Discomfort was irrelevant. There was only the mission. Walsh monitored Eli carefully, watching for signs of fatigue, of degraded performance, of the 1,000 small failures that could compromise a sniper after hours of continuous operation. He saw none. Eli was a machine, methodical, patient, absolutely focused. 1,300 to 1,500 hours, kills 20 through 25, each one deliberate, each one necessary. Japanese activity had decreased noticeably, soldiers staying in caves unless absolutely necessary. Movement between positions had nearly stopped. The hill that had been buzzing with activity that morning was now nearly silent. The Marines were winning, not through assault, not through artillery, through the systematic application of precision violence by one man with a rifle.
At 15:30 hours, Eli observed a Japanese soldier attempting to signal other positions. Using a mirror to reflect sunlight, common communication method when radio silence was required or when radios weren't available. The range was 650 yards, Eli's longest shot of the day. Wind was variable, gusting. The light was beginning to change as afternoon progressed toward evening. Difficult shot, but not impossible. Walsh called the range. 650, wind's tricky, coming from 4 o'clock but gusting to maybe 8 miles per hour. You sure about this one? Yes. Eli compensated for distance, for wind, for the slight angle. The math was complex, but he'd done it so many times it was instinctive, felt the calculations rather than thought them. The shot broke. Through the scope, he watched the mirror fall from the soldier's hands as the man collapsed. Kill 26, the longest shot of the day. Perfect. 1,600 to 1,700 hours. The final 3 kills came as Japanese forces attempted to evacuate wounded from exposed positions. Tactically, Eli made real-time decisions about target selection. The wounded soldiers themselves weren't threats, couldn't fight. Under some interpretations of the rules of engagement, they shouldn't be targeted, but the soldiers doing the evacuating were valid targets. More importantly, Japanese attempts to evacuate wounded indicated they were abandoning positions, pulling back, accepting defeat. That was a tactical victory worth preserving. Kill 27 at 16:15. Soldier carrying a wounded man. Both went down. Kill 28 at 16:48. Another evacuation attempt. Same result. The evacuations stopped. The wounded would die in place. The Japanese had learned that trying to save their injured just created more casualties. Brutal. But this was Peleliu. Brutality was the only currency that mattered. 1742 hours. Light was fading, the sun dropping toward the western horizon. Shadows lengthening across the coral ridges. Eli's unertal scope, excellent for 1940s technology, had limited light-gathering capability. As darkness approached, target acquisition became increasingly difficult. One more officer emerged from a cave entrance Eli had been observing all day, possibly attempting to rally troops, or organize withdrawal, or just check on his men. He was an officer. He was a target. Range 560 yards. The light was marginal. Eli could barely make out details through the scope, had to rely on silhouette recognition rather than clear visual identification. The shot was there, but it was right at the edge of capability. In another 10 minutes, it would be too dark to engage reliably. Eli took the shot. The officer fell. Walsh recorded it. Target 29, 1742. Officer, 560 yards. Confirmed kill. Eli lowered his rifle, removed the 6th sock from the barrel, rolled it carefully, placed it with the others. 29 confirmed kills. 33 rounds expended total, 12 hours in position, the perfect day. But the day wasn't over. Marine Corps sniper doctrine was explicit. After engaging targets from a hide position, snipers must remain in place for a minimum of 6 hours before attempting extraction. Movement immediately after firing could reveal the position, could get you killed by Japanese patrols or observers who'd been waiting for exactly that mistake. So Eli and Walsh waited, 1742 to 2300 hours, 5 hours and 18 minutes of absolute stillness. Lying in the coral hide, darkness falling, night sounds emerging. The waiting was harder than the shooting. During the day there had been purpose, activity, the focus of target acquisition and engagement. Now there was only stillness, and the knowledge that if a Japanese patrol found them, there would be no escape. Walsh whispered at 1900 hours, "What if they send another patrol, like this morning? Then we find out if 29 was worth it." "You think it was?" Eli considered the question. 29 men were dead because of him. 29 Japanese soldiers who'd had families, futures, dreams. All ended by bullets from a Kentucky coal miner's son. But those 29 deaths had broken Japanese defensive capability on Hill 326, had saved Marines from dying in frontal assaults, had accomplished a mission that conventional tactics couldn't achieve. Yes, it was worth it. Walsh was quiet for a moment, then 86 total now. Guadalcanal, Cape Gloucester, here. 86 confirmed kills. You ever think about that number? Every day. Does it bother you? Yes. But you keep doing it. Because it needs to be done. Because every enemy I kill is Marines who go home alive. That's the only math that matters. Walsh understood. You didn't have to like what war made you do. You just had to do it. And find some way to live with yourself afterward. The hours crawled past. 2100, 2200, finally 2300, full darkness, time to move. They extracted from the hide with infinite care, every movement deliberate, every sound minimized. The same patience that had allowed them to kill 29 men now applied to escaping without being detected. It took 2 hours to cover 500 yards back to Marine lines, moving in darkness through terrain honeycombed with Japanese positions. Any mistake would be fatal. But they'd been doing this for 2 years, knew how to move, how to avoid detection, how to become invisible even while in motion. 100 hours, November 5th. Eli and Walsh reached friendly lines, challenged by Marine sentries. Proper response given, allowed through. Captain Ridgway was waiting. He'd been monitoring the situation all day, had received reports from intelligence, from infantry units facing Hill 326, from radio intercepts of Japanese communications. He knew what Eli had accomplished, even before Walsh handed over the notebook. Ridgway read the entries, page after page of clinical documentation, time, target, range, result. The evidence of a masterpiece in applied violence. 29 confirmed kills, 33 rounds expended, 12 hours in position, 0 friendly casualties. He looked up at Eli. "You just did what an entire infantry company couldn't do in a week." Eli said nothing. Exhausted beyond words. 26 hours without sleep. 12 of those hours in absolute focus. The mental and physical toll was crushing. "Get food. Get rest. I'm putting you in for the Navy Cross." "Sir, I was just doing my job." Your job was to neutralize enemy positions. You systematically destroyed their entire command structure using nothing but a rifle and spare socks. That's not just doing your job. That's rewriting the manual on what's possible. Ridgway dismissed them. Eli and Walsh walked to the mess tent. Ate without tasting the food. Just fuel, just calories. Then to their tents. Walsh fell asleep immediately. Eli lay awake, thinking about the 29 faces he'd seen through the scope. The Japanese officer at 0612, the man with the photograph at 0900, the senior commander at 1134, all the others. Each one a person. Each one someone's son or brother or father. He regretted none of the kills. They were enemy combatants. Killing them was his mission, his duty, the reason the Marine Corps had trained him and equipped him and sent him to Peleliu. But he'd remember them, all of them. 86 faces across 2 years. 86 men who died without ever seeing who killed them.
That was the price of being a ghost. You were invisible to the enemy. But the enemy was never invisible to you. You saw them, knew them, killed them, and carried that knowledge forever. Sleep came eventually, and for once, the dreams were quiet. November 5th, 1944, 0800 hours. Captain Ridgway led an infantry patrol toward Hill 326. Standard practice after sniper operations: confirm kills, assess damage, determine if the position had been neutralized or if additional action was required. The patrol approached cautiously, expecting resistance, prepared for firefights. They found nothing. The Japanese positions were abandoned, cave entrances empty, equipment left behind. No soldiers, no resistance, just silence. And bodies, 29 bodies, scattered across the hillside, exactly where they'd fallen, each one a precise kill, each one proof of what one Marine with a rifle could accomplish. Ridgway's men counted, cross-referenced Walsh's notebook. Every entry matched, every kill confirmed. Perfect correlation between the written record and physical evidence. The patrol found Japanese documents in one of the caves, a company commander's report, partially written, never completed. The text read, "Effective command impossible. Officers eliminated by unseen sniper. Estimate enemy employs new weapon or technique our forces cannot counter. Recommend immediate withdrawal from current positions." The report ended there. The officer who'd been writing it was kill number 16, dead at 12:27 hours while attempting to warn his superiors about the threat they faced. Ridgway kept the document, would include it in his after-action report. Evidence that Eli's technique wasn't just effective, it was incomprehensible to the enemy. They literally could not understand how one American sniper could kill their officers without ever being detected. The patrol returned to Marine lines by 1100 hours. Ridgway immediately filed his report with division headquarters. The report went up the chain of command: battalion, regiment, division, each level adding endorsements, confirmations, recommendations for commendations. By November 6th, the story had spread through every Marine unit on Peleliu. The quiet kid from Kentucky who'd killed 29 Japanese in one day, who'd used a sock on his rifle to become invisible, who'd broken an enemy defensive position without firing a single artillery shell or losing a single Marine. Sniper platoons across the island began requesting extra sock allocations. Supply sergeants, initially confused, approved the requests after learning why. The sock technique was no longer controversial, no longer unofficial. It was proven, combat tested, devastatingly effective. By December 1944, the Marine Corps formally updated sniper doctrine. The sock technique was described in detail, credited explicitly to PFC Elijah Brennan, required training for all scout snipers. What had been rejected as unconventional and unserious 2 years earlier was now official Marine Corps policy. Field innovations don't wait for institutional approval. They prove themselves in blood. If they work, they spread. If they don't, they're forgotten. Eli's technique worked, so it spread. November 15th, 1944. Awards ceremony on Peleliu. The 1st Marine Division had finally secured the island. The cost had been catastrophic, highest casualties of any Pacific campaign. But the island was taken, the mission accomplished. Elijah Brennan stood at attention while the division commander pinned the Navy Cross to his uniform. The citation was read aloud. For extraordinary heroism in action against enemy Japanese forces on Peleliu, Palau Islands, November 4th, 1944. Private First Class Brennan, serving as a scout sniper, voluntarily positioned himself within close range of heavily fortified enemy positions. Over a 12-hour period, he systematically eliminated enemy command and control personnel, achieving 29 confirmed kills without being detected or receiving return fire. His actions directly resulted in the collapse of enemy defensive capability
on Hill 326, saving numerous Marine lives and demonstrating the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. The assembled Marines applauded. Eli accepted the medal, saluted, returned to formation. He felt conflicted. Pride mixed with the weight of what that honor cost. 29 men dead in one day, 86 total now. Nearly 100 human beings who'd ceased to exist because Eli Brennan was good at shooting. Walsh clapped him on the shoulder afterward. "You earned it." "So did you. You were there the whole time." "I called ranges and kept notes."
"You pulled the trigger. There's a difference."
Eli pressed the medal into Walsh's hand. "Keep it safe for me." That night, alone in his tent, Eli thought about his father, about the mountains of Kentucky, about a lesson learned when he was 10 years old. One shot, one animal. Tomorrow there would be new missions, new targets, new distances, new men to kill. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, Elijah Brennan had done enough. The radio operator who'd intercepted the Japanese transmissions from Hill 326 would later testify at Eli's Navy Cross hearing. His statement was entered into the official record. "I have monitored enemy communications throughout the Peleliu campaign. I have never heard panic in their voices. The Japanese are disciplined soldiers, professional, calm under fire. But on November 4th, monitoring Hill 326, I heard fear, complete fear. They did not understand what was killing them, could not locate the threat, could not fight back.
And that fear broke them more effectively than any artillery barrage could have achieved."
The hearing officer asked, "In your professional opinion, what was the tactical impact of Private First Class Brennan's actions on November 4th? The radio operator didn't hesitate. "Sir, he won the battle for Hill 326 single-handedly. Without him, we'd have lost another 100 Marines taking that position, maybe more." The Navy Cross was officially approved on November 20th, 1944, but Eli never wore it, kept it wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom of his pack, next to his father's shooting glove. Iwo Jima, February 1945. The sock technique had spread across the entire Marine Corps sniper community. 3rd Division, 4th Division, 5th Division. Every sniper platoon preparing for the Iwo Jima assault had been briefed on the Brennan method. Supply sergeants issued extra socks as standard equipment. Dark wool, navy blue or black, 12 per sniper, treated as consumable ammunition. The volcanic ash and sand of Iwo Jima made dust signature management critical. Traditional snipers created obvious clouds with every shot. The island's black sand was fine as powder, disturbed easily, visible from hundreds of yards. Socks solved the problem completely. Marine snipers using the Brennan method operated with near impunity during the Iwo Jima campaign. Japanese counter-snipers, who'd been devastatingly effective on other islands, couldn't locate American shooters, couldn't return fire, couldn't protect their own officers and observers. The estimated Japanese casualties from sock-equipped American snipers during Iwo Jima exceeded 400. A conservative estimate. The real number was probably higher. Eli participated in the Iwo Jima operation, added 8 more confirmed kills to his total, bringing his count to 94. But Iwo Jima wasn't like Peleliu. The fighting was more chaotic, more fluid. Opportunities for extended sniper operations were limited. The Marines were pushing forward constantly. No time to establish hides and wait for targets. Eli adapted, fired from temporary positions, engaged targets of opportunity, moved with the infantry. On February 23rd, he was observing the flag raising on Mount Suribachi through his scope when a Japanese mortar barrage hit nearby positions. Shrapnel caught him in the left shoulder and leg. Minor wounds, but enough to warrant evacuation. Eli argued, wanted to stay with his unit. Walsh intervened. "You've done enough, Eli. Go home." "The war's not over." "No, but your war is. You've killed 94 enemy soldiers, developed a technique that saved hundreds of Marine lives. You've earned the right to go home." Eli was medically evacuated to Pearl Harbor, then stateside, arrived in San Francisco on March 15, 1945. The war in the Pacific would continue another 5 months. Okinawa, the Philippines. Finally, the atomic bombs and Japanese surrender in August. But Eli Brennan's war was over. Final statistics: 94 confirmed kills, 0 unconfirmed, 2 Purple Hearts, Navy Cross, Silver Star with 2 oak leaf clusters, and a technique that would save American lives for the next 40 years. Harlan County, Kentucky, April 1946. Eli came home on a spring morning, 27 years old, lean, scarred, changed in ways his family couldn't understand. His father met him at the bus station. Silas had aged. Coal dust had finally won. The cough that had been mild in 1941 was severe now, constant. They didn't talk on the walk home, didn't need to. At the house, Silas handed Eli something, a newspaper clipping, the Harlan County Herald, article about Eli's Navy Cross, his service record, the sock technique. "You made the shot count," Silas said, "like I taught you." That was all. No questions about the war, about what Eli had seen, about the 94 men he'd killed. Silas understood. Some things you don't talk about. You just carry them. Eli found work at the Harlan post office, sorting mail, delivering packages. Quiet work. No one shooting at him. No decisions about who lived and who died. The nightmares came regularly. Japanese officers falling through his scope, the man with the photograph, faces he'd never forget. But the days were bearable. Work, family, the mountains he'd grown up in. In 1947, Eli met Margaret O'Neill, 24 years old, schoolteacher, Irish descent, red hair, green eyes, practical, strong. She knew he'd been a sniper, knew he had nightmares, didn't ask questions. They married in June. Simple ceremony, small church, family and friends. Over the next 8 years they had 4 children: Silas Jr., Patrick, Catherine, Nathaniel. Eli taught them to shoot, just like his father had taught him, started young, emphasized patience, precision, making every shot count. But he never told them about the war, never mentioned the 94 men, never explained why he sometimes woke up in the middle of the night reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. Margaret understood, left him alone with his memories, created a life that was normal, stable, safe. Eli worked at the post office for 34 years, delivered mail through Kentucky winters, through floods, through strikes, reliable, quiet, the mailman who never missed a day. His co-workers had no idea he'd been a sniper, had no knowledge of Peleliu or Iwo Jima or the 94 confirmed kills. Eli preferred it that way. The war was over. He'd done his duty, survived, come home. That was enough. But the Brennan method lived on. Korean War, 1950 to 1953. Every Marine Scout sniper deploying to Korea was trained in the sock technique. It was doctrine now, standard operating procedure, part of the curriculum. The frozen mountains of Korea presented new challenges: extreme cold, snow, wind that could shift bullet trajectory dramatically at long ranges. Marine snipers adapted the technique. At Chosin Reservoir, during the brutal winter fighting, snipers discovered that wet socks could be frozen solid. Ice-coated fabric became an even more effective flash suppressor than dampened wool. The frozen socks lasted approximately 3 shots before shattering from muzzle blast. But those 3 shots were completely signature-free, invisible in the snow-covered mountains. Chinese forces, who'd been effective at locating and neutralizing American snipers in other sectors, couldn't counter Marines using frozen sock technique. The flash elimination was perfect, the visual disruption absolute. Marine after-action reports from Korea consistently credited the Brennan method with superior concealment capability and higher survival rates for sniper teams. The technique worked in tropical jungles, worked in volcanic ash, now proven effective in Arctic conditions. Universal application. That was the mark of true innovation. 1976, Quantico, Virginia. The Marine Corps invited Elijah Brennan to speak at the Scout Sniper School graduation. First time he'd been on a military base since his discharge 31 years earlier. Eli was 57 now, grey hair, weathered face, still lean, still moved with the economy of motion that marked professional hunters. He stood before 47 graduating snipers, young men, 18 to 24 years old, the age Eli had been when he fought on Guadalcanal and Peleliu. They knew who he was, knew his record. The sock technique they'd all learned was named after him in the training manuals, the Brennan method. Eli's speech was brief. He'd written nothing down, just spoke from memory. They asked me how I felt killing 29 men in one day. I felt like I was doing my job. Those Japanese soldiers were trying to kill Marines. Every enemy soldier I eliminated was Marines I saved. People want to make it dramatic, make it some kind of motion picture story. It wasn't dramatic. It was patient work, careful observation, good shooting. The sock over the barrel. People act like that was some brilliant innovation. It wasn't. It was common sense. The barrel flash gave away positions. The sock solved that problem. Any Kentucky hunter could have figured it out. I just happened to be the Marine who tried it first. You young snipers graduating today, don't wait for perfect equipment. Use what you have. Adapt to your situation. The best weapon is the one that works, not the one in the manual. And remember this, every man you kill through that scope is a person, a son, a brother, maybe a father. You'll see their faces for the rest of your life. That's the price of this work. But you'll also save your brothers, the Marines who come home because you eliminated the enemy before he could fire. That's the only math that matters. Do your job, make your shots count, come home. That's all I ever tried to do. The room was silent. Then one sniper stood, started clapping. Others joined. Within seconds, all 47 were on their feet. Standing ovation. Eli was uncomfortable with the attention, nodded, left the podium quickly. But outside, waiting for his ride back to the airport, a young corporal approached, maybe 20 years old, nervous. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you. My father was at Peleliu, 1st Marine Division. He said if it wasn't for snipers like you, he wouldn't have made it home. So I wouldn't exist. My family wouldn't exist. Thank you." Eli shook the young man's hand. "What's your father's name?" "Thomas Walsh, sir. He was a corporal, spotter for a sniper team." Eli stopped, stared. "Bennett's son?" "Yes, sir. You knew my father?" "He was my spotter. For 2 years. Best Marine I ever served with." They talked for 30 minutes. About Walsh, about the war, about what mattered. When Eli finally left Quantico, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Not peace exactly, but something close. Validation. The understanding that what he'd done mattered, that the 94 deaths had purchased something worth having. Lives saved, families created, futures made possible. Maybe that was enough. 1983. The transition. Modern suppressor technology had finally advanced to the point where the Brennan method was no longer necessary for standard operations. Integrated flash suppressors, sound baffles, metallurgy that could withstand the heat and pressure of sustained firing. The M40 sniper rifle, adopted in 1966, could mount suppressors that eliminated both flash and sound signature. More effective than SOCs, more reliable, more professional. The Marine Corps Scout Sniper School stopped teaching the Brennan method as primary doctrine, but it remained in the curriculum. 1 class period. Expedient signature reduction techniques. The reasoning was straightforward. Suppressors could be lost, damaged, unavailable. Every Marine sniper needed to know how to reduce signatures using improvised materials. The SOC technique was history now, but useful history. Battlefield improvisation that had worked when nothing else was available. Instructors demonstrated the method, explained the physics, required students to achieve qualifying accuracy while firing through SOC-covered barrels. 5 shots at 300 yards, all within a 6-inch circle, with a SOC over the muzzle. Most students achieved it easily. The technique didn't significantly degrade accuracy, just as Eli had proven 40 years earlier. The class existed partly for practical fieldcraft, partly for historical education, but mostly to reinforce a principle. Innovation matters more than equipment. Adaptation beats tradition. Individual initiative can change warfare. Elijah Brennan had embodied those principles. The Marine Corps wanted every sniper to understand that. 2003. Marine Corps Scout Sniper Association. The association established the Elijah Brennan Award for Innovation, given annually to the Marine sniper who demonstrated the most creative solution to a tactical problem using expedient materials. The first recipient had developed an improvised ballistic calculator using a watch and compass, allowed accurate range estimation and wind calculation without electronic devices. The second recipient had created near-perfect camouflage from local vegetation in Afghanistan, remained undetected for 72 hours within 200 yards of Taliban positions. The third recipient had modified a rifle sling to serve as a long-range wind indicator. Simple, effective. Exactly the kind of field innovation Eli would have appreciated. Each winner received a small bronze replica of a wool sock, mounted on wood, engraved with Eli's name and dates of service. Eli never saw the award. He died 10 years earlier. But his children attended the first ceremony, accepted the honor on his behalf. His son Patrick spoke briefly. "My father never sought recognition, never promoted himself. He just saw a problem and fixed it. That's the kind of Marine we should all aspire to be. Not the loudest voice, but the one who quietly makes everyone else more effective." The award kept Eli's legacy alive, encouraged each generation of snipers to think creatively, to use what they had, to never stop innovating. March 12, 1993. Elijah Brennan died at home in Harlan County, natural causes, 73 years old, 3 days before his 74th birthday. Margaret found him in his chair, the same chair his father Silas had occupied decades earlier. Peaceful, no pain. The funeral was held at Camp Nelson National Cemetery, full military honors, flag-draped coffin, 21-gun salute. Taps played as the sun set over Kentucky hills. 7 Marine snipers attended, representing different eras: World War II, Korea, Gulf War. Each had used the Brennan method during their service. Retired Major General Paul Thornton delivered the eulogy. Thornton had been a sniper in Korea, used frozen socks at Chosin Reservoir, credited the technique with saving his life. Eli Brennan never sought recognition, never promoted himself, just saw a problem and fixed it. That's the kind of Marine we should all aspire to be. Not the loudest voice in the room, but the one who quietly makes everyone else more effective. Every sniper who learned Brennan's technique, every Marine who came home because a sniper using that technique eliminated an enemy before he could fire. They're all part of Eli Brennan's legacy. Hundreds of Marines are alive today because of a straightforward idea about putting a sock over a rifle barrel. That's innovation, that's service, that's what it means to be a Marine. Semper Fidelis, Eli. Your watch is over, we'll take it from here. The Marines fired the salute. The flag was folded and presented to Margaret. The coffin lowered into Kentucky soil. Eli had come home. For the last time. Marine Corps Museum, Quantico, Virginia, present day. In a climate-controlled display case near the sniper exhibit, a single object rests on blue velvet. A wool sock, navy blue, faded now, powder-stained, small hole where bullets passed through. The fabric worn thin from use. The placard reads, "This wool sock, used by PFC Elijah Brennan on November 4, 1944, represents one of the most significant field innovations in sniper warfare history." Brennan's signature reduction technique allowed him to achieve 29 confirmed kills in a single day without detection, a record that stands to this day. The Brennan method was adopted as official Marine Corps doctrine and taught for 4 decades, saving countless American lives. This sock symbolizes a core Marine Corps principle: innovation, adaptation, and the understanding that sometimes the most effective solutions are the most straightforward ones. Total estimated enemy casualties from snipers using the Brennan method, 1943 to 1983, over 2,000. Elijah Brennan, March 15, 1919 to March 12, 1993. 94 confirmed kills. Navy Cross, Silver Star with 2 oak leaf clusters, 2 Purple Hearts. Semper Fidelis. Most visitors walk past without stopping, just an old sock. Doesn't look like much. But Marines stop, read the placard, study the sock, understanding what it represents. Some salute, quietly, then move on. The sock remains, a testament to innovation, to adaptation, to one Kentucky coal miner's son who understood that the best hunters are never seen. Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, Quantico, present day. Gunnery Sergeant Robert Fletcher, age 38, Texas, addresses his class, 30 students, ages 19 to 24, the newest generation of Marine snipers. Today we learn expedient signature reduction. This technique was developed by PFC Elijah Brennan in 1942. Fletcher holds up a navy blue wool sock. Some of you think this is outdated. Maybe it is. Modern suppressors are more effective, more reliable, more professional. But the principle behind this sock, use what you have, adapt to your environment, never stop thinking, never wait for perfect equipment. That principle is timeless. Brennan developed this technique because he needed a solution and didn't have access to fancy gear. He used a spare sock. It worked. He refined it, taught it to others. It spread. Saved lives. That's what Marines do. We adapt, we innovate, we overcome. Now, each of you will fire 5 rounds at 300 yards, sock over the barrel, achieve a 6-inch group, or you repeat the exercise. This isn't about the sock. It's about proving to yourself that you can perform without perfect conditions, without ideal equipment, that you can make it work with what you have. Questions? A young private raises his hand. Female, 20 years old, Hispanic. The Marine Corps of 2024 is different from the Corps of 1944, but the principles remain the same. Gunnery Sergeant, did Brennan ever regret it? The 94 kills? Fletcher considers the question. He'd researched Brennan extensively, read the after-action reports, the citations, the interviews. According to his son, who later became a Marine sniper instructor, Brennan said this: "I regret the war that made it necessary, but I don't regret saving my brothers." That's the answer you carry with you. The class is silent, understanding. Fletcher continues. Elijah Brennan spent 25 years learning to hunt in Kentucky mountains, learning to shoot, learning that missing wasn't an option because his family needed meat. Then he spent 2 years in the Pacific, Guadalcanal, Cape Gloucester, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, killed 94 enemy soldiers, every one of them trying to kill Marines. He did his job, made his shots count, came home, lived quietly for 48 years, raised a family, never sought glory. That's the example we follow, not the killing, the service, the quiet professionalism, the innovation, the dedication. All right, let's get to the range. Time to see if you can shoot like a Depression-era Kentucky hunter with nothing but a sock and common sense. The students move out, carrying their rifles and navy blue wool socks. The tradition continues. The lesson endures. Harlan County, Kentucky, present day. The Brennan homestead is gone now, torn down decades ago. The land sold. A new house stands where Silas Brennan taught his son to shoot, but in the county courthouse there's a small display. Local heroes, veterans who served with distinction. Elijah Brennan's photograph is there, 25 years old, Peleliu, 1944, holding his M1903 Springfield, slight smile, eyes that had seen too much. The plaque reads, Elijah Brennan, 1919 to 1993, United States Marine Corps, Scout Sniper, developed innovative combat technique that saved countless American lives. Navy Cross recipient, Harlan County's most decorated veteran. One shot, one animal, he never missed. Local children sometimes ask their parents about the display, about the young man in the photograph, about what he did. The parents explain, Marines, Pacific War, a special way of shooting that he invented. The children listen, don't fully understand, but they remember the photograph, the serious young man with the rifle. Someday they'll understand. Someday they'll realize that heroes don't always look like heroes. Sometimes they look like the quiet mailman who delivered packages through Kentucky winters. Sometimes they're the neighbor who never talked about the war, who raised a family and worked an ordinary job and died peacefully in his sleep. Sometimes heroism is doing what needs to be done, then coming home and living a normal life, carrying the weight silently, never seeking recognition. Elijah Brennan understood that, lived it, embodied it, and when he died, he left behind more than a technique, more than a kill count, more than medals and citations. He left behind a lesson about innovation, about adaptation, about doing your duty without complaint, about making every shot count. The sock remains in the museum, the technique lives in the manual, the principle endures in every Marine sniper who learns to think creatively, to use what's available, to never stop adapting. November 4th, 1944, Hill 326, Peleliu. 29 men died that day. One Marine made it happen, using nothing but patience, precision, and a wool sock over his rifle barrel. The mathematics of that day defined Eli Brennan's legacy, but the deeper meaning transcended numbers. In an era of industrial warfare, where victory seemed to require overwhelming material superiority, Eli proved that individual skill and elementary innovation remained decisive. The atomic bombs that would end the war were being constructed while Eli operated on Peleliu. Those weapons represented the ultimate expression of American technological might. Eli's sock represented something different, but equally American: the ability to identify a problem, develop a practical solution, implement it immediately without waiting for official approval or specialized equipment. Both approaches contributed to victory: the technological marvel and the field expedient. Both mattered. One Marine, one rifle, one sock, and the understanding that sometimes the most devastating weapons aren't complicated. They're so straightforward they seem absurd until they work. Elijah Brennan proved they work, and in doing so, he wrote himself into Marine Corps legend. Not as the loudest voice, not as the most decorated, not as the highest ranking, but as the quiet kid from Kentucky who understood that the best hunters are the ones their prey never detect, who made every shot count, just like his father taught him.